We're at Enchanted Rock State Natural Area in technically Fredericksburg, Texas, although it's probably, 18 miles to town.
Yeah, and there's pretty much nothing between here and town, and they do warn you to make sure that you have filled up with gas, you have your supplies, water, all the things that you need with you, because there's a few things at the park store, but you're really going to want to make sure you have everything before you drive that 18 miles out here.
And there's quite a large trail system here. We've only done one so far, and that is the Summit Trail, and that takes you to, I'm gonna go up a little bit so you can see it.
Way up here.
All the way to the top of the granite dome here at Enchanted Rock. And I think it's, a little over 1,800 feet we measured when we got up there. So it's leg day in Texas when you start out on Summit Trail.
Enchanted Rock is really cool. That's obviously what the park is named for, and it is what it is known for, and that's mostly why people come here, although there are other trails. But it is a pretty good steep hike up. There's no official trail once you hit the rock. You're kind of free to roam over the rock and take whichever path up that steep slope works best for you. There's a few outcroppings of rock, and there's rocks that's fallen down, but just watch your footing. Definitely make sure you have good shoes, sturdy shoes with a good sole, so you can like grip that rock, and especially when you're coming down, because again, you're like, they say sort of like zigzag, and anytime you got a steep thing, because you'll exert less effort and less worry about falling down. So but otherwise, I mean, we've seen everybody, all ages, little kids, grandparents, and everybody in between climbing that rock, because anybody can do it as long as you take your time.
It's about a mile total, half mile up, half mile back.
Yeah, it says 0.8 on the map, but that's really counting like from the parking lot, not actually like the rock itself.
And it depends how much you walk around once you're up there. We logged, a mile and a half total or something. Yeah. But it was, once you're up there, you get to the top, then you can keep going, and there's some flatter areas that you can kind of walk out towards and see some beautiful vistas and really just great views. It was kind of breathtaking at times. It's really neat up there.
Even if you're only coming to the park to do the rock and not do the trails, make sure you have a hat, sunscreen, and plenty of water. It's Texas. It gets hot here. There's no water around, once you're at the top. And depending on how long you spend up there, it can get really hot. Also be prepared for it to be really windy. So if you have a hat, either, have a strap or be able to like tuck it away somewhere so you don't lose it and have it go flying. Sunglasses. I always have my binoculars with me, and your camera, just because it is, such a cool place once you get up there. You can see 4 miles. Oh, it's so cool to see the Texas hill country and countryside.
And you're really high up there when you get to the top, and the vultures that are circling are pretty close. So you're pretty.
They're like at the level of the rock, like almost landing on the rock. Yeah, that was cool.
So, and there are a number of other trails. What I noticed looking at the map, and we'll check at least one more trail out while we're here, is there's the Summit Trail to the top, but then there's also a number of trails that there's a loop trail and some others that kind of take you around the base of the rock. They'll take you around the back so you can see the other side of it, and there's a lake down there somewhere. So it's kind of a neat area to check out.
Okay, so it's not ice cream, but it's pretty close. It's Kona shaved ice we got the Mai Tai flavor, pineapple, orange, and lime, I think. But definitely a nice treat on a hot day. We just finished Loop Trail, which pretty much takes you the entire perimeter of the park and around the Enchanted Rock so that you can see it from pretty much all sides. The map says it is 4.6 miles and will take you about 2.5 hours because they considered a moderate to difficult trail. It did indeed take us 2.5 hours, probably the first time that's been right, but we tracked about just shy. I think if I'd walked back to the van here, it would have been exactly 5 miles. So about an extra half mile for us, which includes all of our back and forth with our, cameras and pictures and just kind of enjoying the scenery. So that's probably on par for us and gives you an idea of what to expect.
I really liked the Loop Trail. I thought it was a neat way to see the granite dome from all, like you said, from all different sides. And as you get around to the different sides, you can see what they talk about with the different kind of rock slides that have happened over, thousands of years and are continuing to happen. So it's really neat to see that sort of the rock sort of coming off. And it's amazing to see how big they are and think, how have they stopped halfway down? Like there's so much weight there. So it's a neat way to see it though.
And I think they call it, what did they?
It's like exfoliating.
Exfoliating rocks, which is a weird word, but that's essentially what it is. It's sort of like flaking or chipping off the mountain, and just over the centuries seeing all those rocks come sliding down, and the trails that they're leaving behind with them.
And then the other thing that you can see when you're back there is there are a number of primitive campsites that you can get in. There's little camping areas and things that you can hike into. It's another nice view of the granite dome there that we were talking about before, about being on Summit Trail. And there's actually a little ways back the trail we just came on, there's the Moss Lake camping area. There's some primitive campsites in there, and it's kind of cool because you're basically camping and looking up at that dome the whole time. Kind of neat. I don't know about tent camping rustic in Texas. There's a lot of things here that
there's a lot of things out to kill you in Texas.
Just like Florida. Where do we pick these states?
I don't know.
That's what happens when you don't have snow.
We need to go back to like Illinois or something. But one thing to note too, there's, I think I had said earlier, there's no water pretty much. It's all rustic, right? You're on trails. You're out in the backcountry here, but there's no water, so you have to carry everything with you. However, there's at least 4 vault toilets around that 4.5 mile loop. Most of them are out near the backcountry camping sections, but at least you know that there is facilities out there, because unlike where we have camped in previous places where we're just known to like go off into the woods if you have to do your business, I would not be doing that in Texas. There are way too many things out to kill you here. So at least if you can hold it until you can get to one of those vault toilets, know that they are out there on that trail.
And they're spaced out pretty well along the trail. So you'll have an opportunity to use those if you need them. And yes, you got to learn firsthand what a diamondback rattler sounds like when he is warning you, because you walked right past one.
So I think we've mentioned before, I mean, I love snakes. I love seeing them. But we haven't actually been anywhere where we've had, have to deal with venomous snakes. I mean, we were in Texas last year, but it was too cold and everybody warned us they weren't out yet. We're in prime spring season when they're just starting to come out. And sure enough, walking down the trail, heard the rattle, and immediately we're like, okay, where are you? He was right on the side of the trail. He did his thing. I did mine, backed up. He kind of looked and we kind of stared at each other for a minute. We slowly backed away, and he turned around and eventually went into the woods. So, that's exactly what you need to do. There's no cause for alarm, but just don't startle him or her, and they won't, do anything for you, I guess, or to you, I guess.
I mean, I think, the rattle is there to warn you, to say, hey, don't mess with me. I will bite you. And he rattled, and you did not mess with him. You jumped pretty good.
I jumped because it was the first time I'd heard one in kind of reality, I guess, like outside of like a zoo or someplace where I'd encountered them before. So from a firsthand experience of somebody who really does love snakes, but that first time is still very nerve-wracking because you don't know how big it is, where it is it right under your foot, is it off in the woods? And he was a couple feet away, but still pretty close. So I kind of laughed. I'm like, dude, if you hadn't done anything and you just sat there and been quiet, I would have just kept walking. I wouldn't have even seen you.
And he was a good 3 feet?
Probably about 2 to 3 feet. I mean, good size. I mean, pretty good size around too. So not something you want to mess with. So for those of you who are like us from northern states where you don't encounter these kinds of things that are out to kill you, just be forewarned, and make sure if you have pets that they're on a leash, they're not wandering off, because pets are allowed on that loop trail. It's the only trail in the park they're allowed. So you just want to make sure that you have control of your animal and your little kids at all times, just because you don't want them running off into like trying to pick a wildflower or chase after a squirrel or anything of that thing.
As the name indicates, loop trail is a loop. So you can start from either end and you'll make it all the way around. We went clockwise around the dome, and that was a recommendation by the ranger that we talked to, because she said that tends to work better, because then about the last third of the loop there's more trees, so you get some shade and it kind of feels good as you're at the end of the loop. We started late in the afternoon. Yeah. And it was really sunny when we started. It clouded over. So we were thankful for the shade, because we were thinking if you're starting late in the day, you might want to actually go counterclockwise, because then you would start in the shade. And then by the time you got out to where it's not as shaded, maybe it's a little cooler.
And you wouldn't overheat quite so much at the beginning as you would if you started. Now, if you're like smack dab in the middle of the day, you're probably going to want to start clockwise. Somewhere up there, let me look up there. Yep, about right up there is where we were hiking earlier at the top of Enchanted Rock. I also decided that we realized for a good chunk of, just because of the way the trail loops, you are on the backside of Enchanted Rock, but you're sort of walking with your back to it. Whereas if you were going counterclockwise, you actually see more of the dome as you're walking to it, around it, toward it. So I feel like that's a better view of it if you go counterclockwise. So I guess it kind of depends on if you want to deal with shade or you want to deal with view, or, you know, which, if you're headed out to one of those primitive campsites, like which direction you'd want to come in from.
Or if you go clockwise like we did, just make sure you're periodically looking over at the dome to make sure, because there were a couple times even I stopped you and I'm like, wait, that's a really cool view from here. So you have to stop and look and make sure you're looking behind you, and you'll see that a little bit better. But it's also interesting, depending on what part of the loop you're on, it's either where the trees are, it's more of a regular dirt trail. But the rest of it was a lot of, I don't know, almost like a red gravel we were walking on.
It was very much red gravel. And I would say I just had my hikers and low socks on, which was fine from the heat perspective, but I was getting a lot of that gravel down in my socks and my shoes. And I thought too late that I do have gator shoes. You know, I have little running trail gaiters for my shoes that I used to use for trail running. I should have put those on, but I was expecting, honestly, given that we were on a rock formation, I was expecting the trail to be mostly hard rock, and it wasn't. It was all this pebble gravel and then the dirt. So taller socks, taller shoes, just if, you know, or you're going to be picking little rocks out of your socks and shoes most of the way.
There are numerous trails in this park, different lengths, different capabilities necessary, you know, whether they're easy or intermediate, that kind of thing. And actually several of them intersect loop trail. So if you wanted to, you could, instead of going all the way around, you could take one of those that intersects and cut through a different part near the dome, and then back to the parking lot. I think distance might end up being kind of the same, but
it might be but a couple of them are more rock scrambles. So in some cases, you're cutting through the two big rock formations here and up over. They're just different views. So again, look at the map, see what, you know, your level of difficulty is, what time of day it is, how hot it is, how much water do you have. All of the things that, you know, go into making sure that you have a successful hike, because you don't want anything to happen. Make sure you have just a little bit of a first aid kit, just because you never know what you're going to encounter. There's a lot of cactus out here, and rocks. And if you just even have a trip over one of those boulders climbing over it, you know, you don't ever worry about scrapes or twisted ankles or anything. So always be prepared. You know, again, hats, sunglasses, all the things. It's just the things that we always remind people of, but sometimes you head out for the day and you just don't really think about it.
One of the things I noticed as we were hiking through about the trails that intersect is when you're up at the top of the dome, you look over and there's kind of a rock formation off to the side, and we weren't sure what that was. Well, that's Turkey Peak, and you can actually, there's the Turkey Peak or Turkey Pass Trail, I think, is what it's called. And you can take that, and it's about 3/4 of a mile, and then you can climb up Turkey Peak if you want to see it. So I don't know if it's a trail that goes all the way up. As we're sitting here, a couple of guys just walked by with climbing gear, so maybe you have to climb at some point. I don't know, but
that is something you can do here, though, with permission and the right passes, whatever. You can do some rock climbing here.
Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned passes. There is, like we said, primitive camping here, but even if you're just coming in for day use, you have to have a reservation. You have to get online ahead of time. Now, the ranger told us that weekdays are much quieter, so it's not as big of a deal, but we looked on Thursday, I think. We were looking to come out this weekend, and when we looked online on Thursday, Saturday was already booked all day. You couldn't get in here. And it's
time out. It's starting to rain a little bit, and I just want to put the paper map away.
Okay. It's unusual that there's
rain. It's a good thing that there's rain. Texas has not had any rain.
Yeah. Well, this part of Texas,
not really even rain. It's just kind of sprinkling. But
yeah, this part of Texas has been very dry. So, but yeah, so I think it was either Wednesday or Thursday we got online. We said, let's head out here this weekend and see if we can get a day pass. Well, Saturday was already booked up. We couldn't get anything. The first available for Sunday at that point was 2 p.m. So we took it and we got in, and there's like a 2-hour window. So it was a 2 to 4 we'd come in. But we actually got here a little bit early. We got here about 1:30 and they were fine. We stopped at the store, looked around, did a couple things, and then they let us in, even though it was before 2 o'clock. So that's not a problem. But just keep that in mind. And a lot of state parks now in Texas are requiring you to do reservations even for day use.
This is also considered an international dark sky park because you're kind of out here in the middle of nowhere, and you can see on a moonless, cloudless night, you're going to see like thousands of stars. So the park does stay open late so that you can see that. And so apparently different times of the year they do different evening activities for the stars, so check those out. It's something we may come back to later during our trip here, because I'm kind of curious to see what they've got going on.
Yeah, and specifically I believe it's Loop Trail that they leave open later. Most of the trails close at sundown, but this one stays open later, and that's, people do come out here specifically and do part of Loop Trail for the dark sky experience, so that's kind of something neat to do that too.
If you come here, like we said, it's not exactly just a day use, because there is some tent-only camping here, but there's a lot of picnic tables, so bring a picnic, bring some snacks. So whether you're coming to hike or you're coming to look for the stars, I just think this is a really nice park, and I understand now why it's so popular, because it's so different. I mean, it's just a different experience. And for those who think Texas is this flat, vast, like ranch country with cattle, hill country far defies anything that you'd ever imagine out of Texas. And when you're up on Enchanted Rock, it sure does feel more like Utah or New Mexico with the rock formations. It's kind of mind-blowing that you're in the middle of Texas here. So just very cool, and definitely worth a visit.
This is a really neat place for you to check out. And I know the big draw here is Enchanted Rock, and climbing up to the top of that and seeing that granite dome is really cool. But when you plan some time here, you're going to have to get a reservation anyway. Spend some extra hours if you can. Check out some of these trails. I think it'd be neat to see the dome from below in different ways. Loop Trail was neat. There's a base trail. There's all kinds of different ones that you can try. So get here, plan on spending some time, spend a good chunk of the day, and just enjoy the peace and quiet that is out here. In the meantime, keep on trekking.
And we'll see you out there.